Well, the governor's response referenced a number of things, going after Mark Kelly, he says, Alyssa Slotkin, Jerome Powell. But he also mentioned what Matt Finn mentioned in his reporting there. He says the only person not being investigated for the shooting of Renee Good is the federal agent who shot her. So is the FBI conducting an investigation into that agent, into the shooting? What can you tell us about that? Will it be made public?
Look, what happened on that day has been reviewed by millions and millions of Americans because it was recorded on phones when it happened. Okay, the Department of Justice, our civil rights unit, we don't just go out and investigate every time an officer is forced to defend himself against somebody or putting his life in danger. We never do. That has nothing to do with what happened in Minneapolis. There are over 1,000 shootings every year where law enforcement are put in danger by individuals, and they have to protect themselves, and they have a lawful right to do so.
This alarming contrast between how upset Harmeet Dillon is over this and the Trump administration, she's saying that she and Bondi are working around the clock. No right is more sacred than the freedom to assemble and pray to God at the same time. And then you listen to Todd Blanche, who was on with Shannon Bream. She said, hey, are you investigating Officer Ross's actions when he killed Renee Good 10 days ago or whenever it was? And he says, millions of Americans saw the video. We investigate when it's appropriate. That is not this case here. So we are not investigating.
You got hit by a car.
82% of people saw that video. 53% think that he should be criminally charged for it. And then the Wall Street Journal comes out and they're reporting that there are incentives for ICE agents, because they need to meet that insane 3,000 people a day quota, that they're getting rewarded even if they bring in people who then get released. These stories of Americans being detained saying, show me your papers. There was a veteran, U.S. veteran, who's on a Carnival cruise, being arrested and a U.S. veteran on a Carnival cruise with his wife, who was taken out of his cabin, someone who served this country.
What is the percentage?
No percentage. Do not act like ICE isn't making, I don't even know how many mistakes a day in pursuit of Stephen Miller's 3,000 a day quota.
Well, look, I hate to say it, Sean, but Democrat leaders are siding with the domestic terrorists. Antifa is waging, as I explained in that clip you played, daily violent assault against ICE officers.
They look at anybody who doesn't actively support Donald Trump as being an insurrectionist and a terrorist, which is ironic because it's insurrectionists and terrorists that tried to put Donald Trump back in office. It's not against the law to have a left-wing ideology. I worked in the Republican Party for conservatives for a long time, but I never thought these other guys on the other side were not Americans or didn't have a point of view that should be respected. It's just completely anti-American. And it comes from a deeply damaged, twisted sense of insecurity. I mean, Kristi Noem knows she has no standing to be this position that she's in now of authority. You have Stephen Miller, who, I mean, you can look at these tapes of him in high school. He's just this kind of sad, pathetic, broken guy who now is using public policy to work through these personal issues. And, the thing that I go back to is Democrats have to start talking about an apparatus to hold these people accountable at the top. This didn't happen after the last Trump administration. I think it was a mistake. And I think now the question is, how are they going to go about holding Kristi Noem and Stephen Miller responsible? And I think we have to have that discussion. We have to come up with that kind of mechanism.
National Security Memorandum 7 basically makes it so that anybody who disagrees with Donald Trump, speaks out against him, refuses to comply with ICE or any of his other arbitrary government agencies, you're now a domestic terrorist. And we're seeing how dangerous this can be. We're not even halfway through the first month of the year.
Yeah, it tells the whole of federal law enforcement to focus on, as you said, this scourge of they say radical violence and thing. And so the question is, what does that mean? So when you approach something from a counterterror framework, unlike traditional crime fighting, which is some crime has been committed, and then you go collect evidence, you present it to a court and try to make your case that this person is guilty of it, and then the jury decides. Counterterrorism tries to preempt crime, and this memorandum makes that very clear. At one point, it says it says something like prevent these crimes before they've taken place. Mm-hmm. And so that's characteristic of counterterrorism, but in a sense, it's like pre-crime, because how do you charge a crime that hasn't occurred yet? Well, you've got to look for what are called indicators. And this memorandum, I encourage people to go and actually look at the document, because so much what I'm saying here is directly quoted from it. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm not paraphrasing. It lists what the administration considers indicators of forthcoming political violence, like, for example, the gruesome murder of conservative commentator Charlie Kirk. It says, here are the list of these indicators. And those indicators, as it turns out, describe at least millions of people in the country. So it was like anti-Christian sentiment, anti-Americanism, whatever that means, it was something like traditional family values. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's just so vague to the point that I don't even think it's necessarily left-wing. It sounds like it's just anyone who isn't MAGA, anyone who isn't the Trump administration. And at the signing of this last week, I think it was Thursday, in the Oval Office, where there were a bunch of top officials, Trump's Homeland Security advisor, Stephen Miller, was there. And the document is sort of careful not to explicit. I mean, as far as terms like anti-family don't connote, non-MAGA. They didn't explicitly say Democrats. And then Stephen Miller comes on and says, this is the first, I'm quoting, all of government effort to go after, I think he said the Democrats, he made it very explicit that this is just pointed at the political opposition. And that's been the most shocking part of all this. You'd think the opposition would have something to say about it. Almost no one in Congress has commented on this. And again, you can go see the directive that says everything that I'm saying. I linked to it in my Substack. This is not some rumor I heard. The document is publicly available for people to review.
With the midterms quickly approaching, it's pretty clear and obvious that we're watching the Trump administration flail and fling around, dealing with their own paranoia. And you can definitely count on the fact that Donald Trump's going to do everything he can to stall or actually get rid of the 2026 midterm elections. Now, he can't legally do that, but he's definitely going to make a lot of noise in the process. The only reason that he became, well, not the only reason he became, but the only reason he ran for president for real in 24 was to stay out of prison. And, that doom and gloom, that weight on his shoulders hasn't really disappeared. Over half of the actions he takes, whether they be through executive action, well, pretty much all of it are illegal, and half of it gets struck down by federal judges, many of those federal judges being individuals who were actually appointed by Donald Trump himself. And so now, we ran up in Venezuela, and we had a plan to get American oil companies in there, but they're not complying because of how much money it's going to cost for them to build the infrastructure necessary, and they've already been kicked out of Venezuela more than once. And so the people there don't want the United States to govern over them. Meanwhile, we're threatening countries like Cuba, Nigeria, Iran, Greenland, and there's no reason to believe, as I continue to say, that Donald Trump and his administration aren't going to run up in these nations, bomb these nations. And again, a lot of it just being out of paranoia. So unfortunately, we have to deal with that as a nation, and the rest of the world does. But what's going to continue to happen as a result is institutions like BRICS, just the Eastern world and the Southern Hemisphere in general will continue to unite and build treaties that block the United States, or at least block our ability to have dominant control over the planet. And we're going to see that happen more and more as the Trump administration continues to sour our relationships with everybody.